Good evening. I'd like to call this regularly scheduled meeting of the Marquette Township Board to order for Tuesday, November 18th, 2014, and ask that you all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk Rotary, roll call, please.
Trustee LaRue.
Here.
Trustee Pompo.
Here.
Trustee Durant.
Here.
Trustee Truscott.
Here.
Treasurer Johnson. Here. Clerk Rotary is here, and Supervisor Limata.
Here.
Staff present is Manager Gerard, Superintendent Kirk Page. Committee members present are Mike Springer from Recreation, John Marks from ZBA, and Dave Wiegand from Recreation and Roads and Planning.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. As you are aware, the consent agenda includes those items that do not typically require immediate board action. This evening includes the approval of prior meeting minutes of November 3rd, received committee and reports from Planning Commission, minutes of September 10th, October 8th, and October 22nd, Marquette County Solid Waste Authority special meeting minutes of October 27th, the October 2014 Sheriff's Report, the October 2014 Fire Marshal's Report, and the October 2014 Fire Department Activity Report. Also has correspondence not requiring board action, includes the charter quarterly franchise fee payment and the Marquette County Board of Canvassers certification of the most recent election results. Also, bills payable this evening in the amount of $437,147.52. Are there any items in the consent agenda that any board member wishes to remove for further discussion?
I'll make a motion we approve the consent agenda.
I'll support.
A motion and support to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is approval of the remainder of the agenda. I would like to suggest two changes to the agenda. First, the item I just handed out is the one you received previously by email, has to do with Mr. and Mrs. Umbrello, the property owners to the immediate west of Lions Field Recreational Area and the new ice rink. It is the easement that was drawn by Municipal Council Roger Zappa, and it has, I'd like to add that as agenda item number 9E. And also this evening, you'll note we have closed sessions, two closed sessions listed as agenda item number 13. Because one of the items that we will consider in closed session may have some bearing on our forum discussion as far as discussion of the 2015 budget. I would like to flip-flop agenda item number 12 and 13 and ask that we go into the closed session as agenda item number 12 and then have the forum discussion immediately thereafter. Anyone else wishing to make any changes to the agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion to approve and a second.
Approve the
As amended.
approve the amendments and then
The first?
Yeah.
Okay. Fine.
To approve the amendments to the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes. I'd also entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
so moved.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. This is going to bring us up to public comment. Those members of the public wishing to address this board may do so at this time. Approach the podium, first and last name. Thank you.
Mike Springer, 206 Eagles Nest Road. As you know, Jason McCarthy and myself were the two representatives from our township on a ad hoc Recreation Authority Feasibility Committee. The term of that committee is over, and we ended up with a report that cost $17,000 that was paid for by the city. Both this board and Chocolate Board accepted the findings of that report and were supportive of it moving forward. And I can, but the city was the one where the stop happened. This is where they found lots of issues with the report and didn't want to move forward with it. What I'm asking the board for is your permission that Jason and I be able to meet with the other 4 members to really move forward the recommendations, or try to move forward the recommendations of that report. That report stated that we did not need another authority. The number 1 recommendation in that report was to form a multi-jurisdictional committee to continue to work on our recreational needs and interests as the 3 municipalities. And if the city doesn't want to be part of that, we hope that with 3 new commissioners there, that maybe they'll see it a little bit differently and take a close look at just what's recommended and what the procedures are to accomplish those recommendations and move forward with it. But I would want to do that with the board's approval to be able to do that. If you have any questions.
Any
And
questions for
I
Mike?
just talked with Mr. Britton too, who is one of also the ad hoc committee members. And he felt that Chocolate, and he can't speak for Chocolate either, but he felt that they have been supportive of the findings, and he felt as though Chocolate Township would want to lean in that direction.
Brittany?
Something we need to act on now or put on the agenda for next week?
You know, if we'd like to consider it, I'll throw it on there, Mike, on the agenda, and we'll have it to you next time. I don't know when you
Okay.
plan on
And
getting
I
together.
can bring more information next time if you want some visuals of what the recommendations are, a reminder of that
Sure.
stuff. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to address the board? Take that as a no. Close public comment and open up board member comment. Those members of the board wishing to address may do so at this time. Lynn, we'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. I have quite a few things. I'll try to be brief. Planning Commission, first of all, last week, we had a public hearing for a special use permit to basically change the structure requirements on a detached family home, square footage. And the more important part of the meeting was the discussion of the lighting ordinance and the streetlight policy. And I had given that to Supervisor Limata at our last meeting. The commission would really like some direction, and I was kind of thinking maybe it would have been on this agenda, but I know it's pretty full time-wise. So Planner McCarthy has requested that we give some kind of direction as soon as possible. That's one of the things we want to start, as well as the capital improvement plan in the next couple months. So however supervisor wants to handle that, that would be good. Secondly, I just came from the library board meeting, and I mentioned to them, well, we had actually had a discussion with the chair a couple weeks ago on the phone, and Manager Gerard, and the library board would like somebody to come and address them and discuss the tax tribunal issues. And Manager Gerard thought that the supervisor would be the best to do that. And I asked if I don't know what their protocols were, if they wanted to do a formal invitation or if we would do it through public comment or not. And the chair will, either the chair or the director will get a hold of you and Randy and set aside time in the January meeting. And I have that date. That would be, and they'll send you, one of them will send you an email. Because it's right before our meeting, they wanted to make sure that they had time for you. It'd be the January 20th meeting. And they would give you like 20 minutes. And if you wanted more than that, there's also another presentation that they would have that night. It's right at the beginning of the agenda so that you can give whatever information you want. Some of the written information that Manager Gerard gave me that I passed on to them, Director Christensen took to a library meeting that next day, I believe, or that week, and handed some of that out and made kind of a little presentation, because I had given them information at that last meeting too, so they they had more information that they didn't have before. So I think they have some questions, and they want to make sure that they know what to do going forward. And the recommendation was that they would be able to start some kind of a, I don't want to say campaign, but at least a communication network with all the rest of the libraries in the state and kind of inform them how this is going to affect their pocketbook as well as everybody else's if it doesn't go through. What was the third thing? Oh, the other thing that I did mention at the library, I said I'd like to take my township hat off now, and as a taxpayer, I brought up something for them to kind of talk about. And I said, this isn't something that you're going to decide or talk about today. It may be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. But I said, think about the idea of not having just a city library, but regional or district or whatever their terms. Their terminology is a little bit different from ours. And the reason I said that was because they've struggled over the years with contributions and budgeting, and they're not sure what's going to happen with hospital taxes and the power plant taxes and the tax tribunal. And I said, in the next 5 to 10 years, you may be struggling more with trying to fund this building. And I said, think about the volunteer base and the knowledge that could be on a more comprehensive board of the whole area. Because it's a city library, it has 4 or 5 city residents that are on their board. And the city does a lot of they do their payroll, they do help with their budget, and they have a lot of, like you'd call it in-kind type things that they don't have to pay for. It all comes through the millage. And I said, whether the city had agreed to that at some point or not, I don't know. But I just wanted it to be kind of a talking point. I said, there's been so many discussions about taxation without representation. I told them that I have always supported libraries. We've always had a library card. It's not like I had anything against the library. When I made statements saying that I didn't feel it was appropriate to tax the public and not have some kind of representation on that board. So to that end is why I made this recommendation. And we had probably 15 minutes of discussion that was very beneficial, I thought. And Chair Patrick suggested that I bring it up because she and I had talked about it. And she said, our board needs to think about something like that because in the future, who knows where this is going? If the structure of the library is changing in that not as many people are reading, they're buying their books, they're getting Kindles, they're educating more in a different way. And I said, you may have a struggle in the future of trying to keep this entity going. So they actually had a budget on what would happen if the whole county decided to go through and do a district library, and it was quite a process, I guess, because some of it's driven by the legislature. Some of the laws would have to be changed. I know that the city charter would be involved, and there's a lot to it. So they're actually going to dig out the materials and go back and see where that was going and what the ramifications are if that were to happen. And it could be like Marquette City, Marquette Township, Negaunee, and Ishpeming. It wouldn't have to be even the whole county if we, whoever that would be, would want to. So I just posed the question, and I thought it would be something that would help them figure out where their future is going to be. Because personally, I don't like to pay taxes and know that I can't really. I'm welcome to come and speak. Anybody is. You don't have to be a taxpayer, anybody. But we really don't have any control over what happens to their budget. We don't, and I don't mean control from a township standpoint, but individually, as a taxpayer, we have no say in what they do with their money, with their building, with anything, their employees, nothing. So that's the part that bothers me as a taxpayer. And other than that, I support the library. I voted for the millage. I support them, but I think they need to start thinking about how their future is going to change. And I think more people, more contributors, more volunteers, more brain power can help that entity stay viable into the future so that it doesn't just disappear. So we may be hearing more on that. That's all I had.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thanks.
Diana?
Nothing at this time.
Ernie?
After that, I don't know. Couple things. I attended the Township Business Association today as your representative, and they're talking about developing a new booklet for the township for all the individuals that are members, and they're going out on a membership drive now to try and enlarge that membership. The ones on the board and that, and the ones that attended are very enthusiastic about what's happening in the township, and they want to try and get that out and get more people involved within that. So they're working on that. They brought up the Christmas lighting that we are involved with, and they are involved with on December 2nd. So that's moving along, right along. The Christmas tree will be cut this week from an individual who's volunteered their tree. They're gonna go over and take it with a big bucket truck and lift it and put it on a flatbed and bring it over and put it up and that. So they're moving forward on some of these things and that. And so I commend them for a small operating group, that small core group that's doing a lot. They're trying to get more people involved all the time in that. But they're working on it, and they're very enthused about the direction of the township's going and how they can be part of that and the overall in that. So, and the last item I have is on your latest magazine from Michigan Township. There's an article in here on financial forum, which has to do with retirement and that, and the new accounting standards, and how that may or may not affect our retirement programs we have. And if you haven't read it, I would suggest you go through and read it. And here again, I'm going back to the same story I had in the past, to have this individual come in from Mercer and just talk and see where we're going and see what we're doing and make sure we fully understand the direction we have in that. That's it.
Thanks, Ernie. Pete?
First of all, I'd just remind people it's pretty slippery out there. We got snow plows are a little bit behind because of the winter plow. The plowers and the helpers, they do not come on board till after deer season. We got this early storm, so be careful. What else? The lighting of the Christmas tree is December 2nd. Mark your calendars, December 2nd at 6 o'clock at the Westwood Mall, and it's also the arrival of Santa Claus. And that's it.
Thanks, Pete. Dan? Clerk Tari?
The only comment I'm going to make is election statistics. We had about 50% turnout, which is going back through the records with one precinct. That's what basically we've had all the years. Now we have two, so pretty good turnout, and both the township millage proposals passed. Basically 70% approval for both items. That's all.
Thank you. So the only comments I have is we certainly have gotten off to a good start to winter with all the snow that's been dumped. I understand that there was some frustration as you tried to navigate the roadways throughout the township. Many of us didn't see a plow come down our roads for 2 or 3 days. And we certainly all understand that because we're on the receiving end of it as well. I would ask people to be patient. It wasn't a typical storm for this time of year. I agree that the roads weren't taken care of as well as they should, but when you get 3.5 feet of snow dumped on you in about 48 hours, it's really hard to keep up with the crew that the road commission has. I know that they were out there doing their best, and I know some of the drivers' wives who were telling me that it wasn't for lack of their husbands not being at home that we're out there. So, please bear with us. We get it that it took the township, especially Trowbridge, a little bit longer to get through. I think that that's going to be another discussion item. We talked about it a couple years ago, signed a contract and having a dedicated driver just for Marquette Township. But that's going to become another item for us to consider in the near future, and it'll be before this board to see if we want to expand that role. The other thing is, thanks for all the people who turned out to vote. I know it's a midterm election and we don't always get a lot of participation. We were happy with the turnout, very happy with the support that we received, both from a library millage standpoint, being 70% or greater like normal, and also for the road rehabilitation plan being 70% or better, which gives us a pretty clear idea of what you'd like us to get done, and now it's our job to make sure that we follow up on that and do it like we said we would. With that, I'll close board member comment. And we'll move into unfinished business. Agenda item number 8A, consider the manager's proposed 2015 goals. It didn't get uploaded into the packet, unfortunately. I recapped what we had discussed at the last meeting. Again, we do need to have it completed by the end of the year. Whether we accomplish it at this time, I'm not as concerned with, but we do need to have some agreed upon goals for the manager by the end of the year, so they're in place, ready to go for January 1st, and he can provide us with some of his tactics on how he intends to accomplish those goals. Hopefully, when you look at the sheet that I just handed out to you, you've got the top 5, which were the proposed goals by Manager Gerard from the last meeting, and then I tried to capture some of the things that people had added on to there. Diana, I didn't forget about you, but some of the goals that you had put on there were ones that were already captured, so I left your name off. But here's kind of a scenario, and I'll open up for the board if we're prepared. Do we want to discuss it? How far do you want to go with this in tonight's meeting? Is it something that you'd rather push back for another meeting and have more time to digest it? Again, we'd hope to come up with 3 to 5 goals. We reviewed where he was at this year with his goals, and how well did he accomplish them, and what should we be doing moving forward. And with that, I'll open it up for discussion at the board level. Lynn?
I'll go first. I don't know if it's the number of goals and objectives that we've done over the last few years, the fact that they're so comprehensive that we struggle during the year with meeting the dates that we either expect or want or the manager proposes. So with the road millage issue, and I think we need to go like 3, unless they're so light that the manager feels he could get them done in a few months. I think it doesn't make sense to overload and have to keep pushing things back, a lot of which was out of his control, or whether he didn't have the staff to do it or whatever. But I think it was either too much or just something on his part, but I'd shoot for maybe 3.
Okay. Anyone else? Pete?
With the sheet here, and I would like to put it off for another meeting because what we have on our agenda tonight, I think we can, that way we all can congest this and come back with the next meeting and do something with it.
Okay. Anyone else? Ernie?
For the next meeting, I agree with Pete with what we got on our plate tonight. Just one thing that the manager brought up as a possible suggestion was number 4, complete the labor market review on compensation. If he can provide some background, just exactly what he is talking about there, that would help me out. Because I was looking at that and I really didn't understand the direction he wanted to go there too, so.
Okay. I'm sure you can be happy to provide more detail on that for you. Anyone else? To make the suggestion that I'll put it on the next agenda and we take a look if, Lynn's suggestion is 3, if everybody wants to bring their top 3, and that way we can kind of see if we have a consensus towards the top 3. If not, then that discussion will either evolve into changing our minds on those 3, or maybe we make it 3 or 4 based on one everyone is. But if you would rank all the ones that are before you on that sheet and choose what you think are the top 3 goals and objectives, that includes you, Manager Gerard, if you want to. You gave us 5. If you want to look at what other suggestions were made by board members, and if you want to show what you think would be your top 3 or 4. If we do them in rank order and then everybody come prepared to present them at the next meeting, I think we can probably move along relatively rapidly. Let me write it down before I forget. I'll send a recap email out. That'll move us to agenda item number 9A. Consider approval of construction contracts for the previously approved ice rink and warming building. Manager Gerard?
As board members know, we've been working to get the renovation of the kiddie park and the ice rink at Lions Field on track. We've gone out for proposals, asked for some proposals, had them come back in, have a design for the warming hut. You see that the ice rink is up and constructed now. It was cleaned off this morning, ready to start the next phase of the construction, which is the warming hut. The initial projected cost for the warming hut was about $67,000. We had a series of proposals that came back in for the various elements of that construction, the footings, the cement work, the block work, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. All of those things came back in. They came in at a price quite a bit higher than what we expected that they would. And what I would like to do to keep this project going, we want to get it built still this early winter. What I'd like to do is ask the board for approval to give staff and the Recreation Committee the authority to go back and renegotiate with the various providers with the objective of getting this project started within the next week or so to a total cost not to exceed $67,000. And I'm asking to allow us to go ahead and negotiate those contracts up to that total cost price for the facility so we can get it going. And Dave is here
kind of
in
integral
the
to
audience as well.
process. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, with the weather being what it is, and right now we've got a bid in front of us for the masonry, for the footings and the flat work, which is the concrete floor and the porches. If we can move it along a little quicker with letting out some of those bids and contracts, we saved a lot of money on the masonry from the original bid process. We cut it in half.
I think that's important to highlight just for the board and public is that we did do requests for proposals and we did receive some,
Right.
but they were shockingly astronomical
Yeah,
of what we thought they were going to be.
The initial concrete bid for the blocks, footings and blocks and the flat work came back at like $28,000 was the low bid in that one. I went out and found some more bidders for that, and we got a price that's just a little over $15,000 to do the same thing. And I think there's a lot of those out there. I think the way the bids were put out, we were trying to hurry it along so we get it done before winter fell upon us. A lot of people didn't bid it. The electrical, the only bid we got on the electrical was from Gladwin. There's a lot of people around here that would bid that. They just need to go be approached. And I think we can negotiate some pretty good contracts with them, and I don't have any reason to suspect that we can't keep it below the opinion of cost that we got from the UP engineers and architects. It would just move it along a lot quicker if we could just have a little freedom to get it done.
Okay. Questions for Manager Gerard or Dave?
Are you saying to look at the ones who bid, plus go out and contact other individuals to see if they can meet or decrease that cost?
Yeah, because when we looked at it, we didn't get a sufficient number of bids to even make it competitive. And I think it was the fact that we put such a short time span on it. That the local electricians, I guess, are the ones, they didn't even pick it up out of the
Builders
contractor
Exchange.
board.
Builders Exchange, yeah.
The Builders Exchange to even start a bid on it, even show up for the meetings. And there are some of those out there that would like to have a chance to bid on it, but they missed the deadline. And the bid is I know we'd like to keep it local, and we're getting a lot of support with offering some volunteers portions of that. And I think there's more of that local than we realize, and I think I'd like to keep it local. The Gladwin electric bid, I think, is, in spite of the fact that it was high, it just seems kind of silly to have to send all the way out to Gladwin to get an electrician to come up here and do this.
Ready?
On the bottom of the bid form, did it say that we have the right to reject any and all?
Yes.
Yep. We do. And that was my recommendation. My recommendation was to the committee that we reject all bids, basically, to give ourselves the freedom to go back out and look for better pricing. Now what we're dealing with is we have the early winter, as has been mentioned already. It's about 2.5 to 3 weeks early to what it normally is. So we have some urgency in wanting to get this going to get that building closed in. That's the reason we're approaching the board and asking for something a little bit different than what we typically do, rather than have to bring everything back to the meeting on December 2nd and get going and lose that time. Since we know this is grant funded, and we know what the cost should be, to allow us the latitude to go ahead and negotiate these contracts up to, not to exceed that price, that original $67,000 price.
And we kind of changed our approach on it when originally we were going to let out the blocks and the flat work and have all that done before we started the rough in. The way the winter fell upon us with short notice, the plan now is to put the footings and block work up and then enclose it with the rough in structure and then do the flat work inside after we get a chance to put some heat on it. So you just have to be a little flexible for the weather. I think we can still get it done this year, and I think we can get it done in a reasonable period of time, but we just need to be a little flexible in what we're doing so we can change it as the weather dictates.
Any other questions? Pete?
Dave, will you explain flat work?
Flat work is the concrete floor inside the building, and there's two patios, one towards the ice rink side and one towards the other side, that are about 12 by 16 feet. That they may not be able to get done this year if the weather stays as bad as it is, but it would be nice to get the portion inside done so that we can finish up the ice rink, or the warming house portion of it. So that's the part when I mean you got to be a little bit flexible. Anyway, that whole thing is called flat work. So.
Any questions? None. You've got staff's recommendation. Oh, go ahead, Dan.
That's 67,000, that's turnkey?
Yeah, that was the opinion of cost that come out of UP Engineering and Architects.
So by giving you the latitude to accept something up to 67,000, I'm assuming that would be turnkey when they're all done?
That's correct.
Here's staff's recommendation is to approve them moving forward so that we don't have to wait every 2 weeks to make approval of the contracts as they're able to move forward on it. Anybody care to make that motion?
I will make the motion to that effect.
I'll second.
Motion and support to provide staff with the latitude to move forward with the Lions Field warming field ice rink project, not to exceed $67,000.
Authorize me to sign?
Authorize Manager Gerard to sign.
Will updates come to the board as you're moving along with what's happening?
December 2nd. Mhm.
Yep. Any other questions or comments? Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Be prepared to provide us with an update on the meeting of December 2nd. We would appreciate it. Next item on your agenda is 9B. Consider the University of Michigan eCity's 2014 press release. You do have a transmittal from Manager Gerard in front of you dated November 13th. Again, we were notified that we were once again the recipients of a 5-star rating indicating excellence. It has to do with, as a municipality, how friendly we are to entrepreneurial activity and growth. They look at different factors: clustering, incentives, growth, policies, community, and education. And Manager Gerard, what would you like to add?
Well, I didn't really have a whole lot more to add. This is the second time in the last 4 years that we've been identified as a 5-star community, also as a 4-star community. It basically is a study that's done that gauges the economic climate in the state of Michigan and the entrepreneurial climate, and recognizes those communities that have taken an outstanding stance in being business friendly and entrepreneurial friendly, and certainly pleased that they looked at us as a 5-star community. I think it says a lot for the board and for the residents.
I saw the quote that I put into the press release, and just Marquette Township is proud to be recognized once again as a 5-star community for fostering economic growth through assisting and encouraging entrepreneurship in our region. By listening to the business community, we strive to create an environment that supports local business, creates opportunity, and removes barriers in government regulation and processes. One more reason why we continue to be a great place to live, work, play, and locate your business. I'd also just point out that we're not an island here, and again, if you look, the city of Marquette was recognized as a 4-star community, same as when we were last recognized in 2012. It just shows that we really are hand in hand on entrepreneurial growth, and the things that we do are very interconnected, and congratulations to the city of Marquette for the recognition as well.
It is. In fact, the years that we've been 5-star communities, they've been 4-star. The years that we've been 4-star, they've been 5-star. So it's, we're right there neck and neck.
Any comments from the board? If not, we'll move on. Seeing none. Consider budget amendment number 2014-11. Clerk Rattari.
Budget amendment, excuse me, 2014-11. Highlights of that are the authorization is requested to reclassify expenditures within the wastewater and water funds. General services, supplies, and uniforms were budgeted low in comparison to actual expenditures and will require another $8,000. The administration department has an ongoing legal fees with Stantec and will necessitate an additional $20,000. T&D services will require additional $10,000 due to the Moran Street water leak repair and work done during the freeze-up. The offsets will come from replacement and improvement and contingency, and I make a motion to approve that.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comment, Clerk Rattari?
Nope.
Trustee LaRue?
Nope.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second to approve the budget amendment. Clerk Rattari?
Clerk Rattari is yes. Trustee LaRue?
Yes.
Trustee Pompo?
Yes.
Trustee Durant?
Yes.
Trustee Truscott?
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson?
Yes.
And Supervisor Limata.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item on your agenda, 9D, Manager's Report. It is verbal, so Manager Gerard.
Yes, with the events of the last couple of weeks and being out of town for part of the time, I did not put a written report together. Basically, just have 4 quick items I wanted to touch on to bring the board up to speed on. One, you probably saw in last Friday's newspaper, which was an article regarding the landfill tipping fees, is companion to an item that you had in your last packet, notice from the Marquette County Solid Waste Authority that the tipping fees were going to be increased. And also the minutes that are in your packet tonight indicate that there are some issues with the authority. We are members of the authority, as are all of the other municipalities in the county, and have some concerns. Superintendent Page and I attended a joint work session between the Marquette County Solid Waste Authority and the City of Marquette regarding the contract that the two of them have entered with regard to the new transfer station to be located on McClellan Avenue. The upshot of that is that the Solid Waste Authority had made a commitment to have the facility ready to go by October 1st, which did not occur, and also have a commitment to have the entire project completed and ready to turn over to the City of Marquette by January 1st. City of Marquette owns the property and is funding the construction of the property, and now there is a dispute between the two parties with regard to money that's been invested in the site to this point, that the Solid Waste Authority will not likely not be able to complete the project by January 1st, which then could trigger the city initiating a 30-day notice to terminate the contract. Where that impacts us as members of the authority is the authority has invested something on the north side of $400,000 in that piece of property to remediate subsurface issues. I'll just put it that way. I'm not exactly sure what all they ran into, but it took $400,000 to remediate it, and they now have about $1.1 to $1.2 million invested in the project. As participants in the authority, if that contract becomes voided and the authority is liable for that, it only comes from one place. So I am concerned about that, and Kirk and I are keeping an eye on it, and we'll try and keep the board informed of where that's going, but we're kind of out of it. The authority does have independent contracting ability and independent management ability, so they are working through some issues. But ultimately, you're going to see, as part of the budget discussion later tonight, a proposed increase in the solid waste fee because of the increased tipping fee, and there may be more to come in the future. So just want to bring you up to speed on that. As Supervisor Limita and Trustee LaRue mentioned, we had unseasonably early winter fall upon us, and we have had a significant number of phone calls from residents regarding the status of the streets and the passability and impassability of some of the streets. I guess the only thing I can say about that is that it is unusual, and it did catch the road commission at a bad time. They typically don't bring on their part-time winter crews until after, as Pete mentioned, after deer season, which is another couple of weeks away, so they got caught flat-footed, basically. Although we knew the storm was coming, they had no idea of how severe it was going to be until the last minute. So they've done the best that they can, and I think everybody needs to remember that their primary responsibility is for US 41 and the M roads, and then followed closely by their primary roads, which are the ones that keep emergency services flowing and keep traffic flowing. The side streets are secondary, and when they get to them, when they can. Unfortunately, that means that it makes it difficult for folks to get around. It was not isolated to Marquette Township. It was 2 days before my street in the city of Marquette was plowed. So, I guess I ask the residents to have some patience. The road commission's doing the best they can. I saw that they had all of their equipment out again today, trying to get the mat, which is the compacted stuff that's on the roadway, trying to get that off as quickly as they can. Unfortunately, it usually ends up in driveways. So, and it's tough to move. We have talked in the past about taking over plowing, particularly in the Trowbridge area. I would ask everyone to remember that the developed part of Marquette Township, the central business corridor here, only is about 8% of our township, and they have to provide services to 100% of the township. So all the way up halfway up on Big Bay Road and all the way west to Nagani Township. So it's a pretty big job for them here just in Marquette Township. A question came up about parking ban. We do not have a parking ban because we do not control the roads. However, if there are issues with vehicles parking in the roadway that are disrupting traffic or blocking access, the road commission does enforce that. So the road commission would be the appropriate contact for those kinds of issues. If they impede plowing, the road commission will have the cars removed or the vehicles removed, whatever it is. The last item is our first Wednesday drop-off. We are seeing a dramatic increase in the amount of material being dropped off on the first Wednesday drop-offs. For a community of 3,900 residents, it amazes me the amount of increasing trash that is being dropped off. We think there is some abuse that's being done there, and we'll be looking at that and possibly bringing back some alternatives to the board, probably for your second December meeting. So that's it.
Thank you. Questions for Manager Gerard? Lynn?
I saw a snowmobile in the bills payable. I thought maybe you were going to mention it. I didn't remember talking about it unless we...
Well, here's what happened on Thursday. No, Tuesday. When did the storm start? Monday, the beginning of the storm on Monday, we lost communications with our well field and our pump house down at off of Grove Street, basically, down on the well field. We had no way to get back there. We had no access to any equipment because it was all out. All of the private equipment had been contracted to do snow removal. And we had no mechanism to get there. Our Jeep couldn't get there. Our loader couldn't get there. I authorized the Public Works Department to acquire a snow machine to get down there, which they did. We can use that not only for Public Works, but for the fire department if they need it as well. So that was on my decision as an emergency measure to acquire that.
Didn't we buy a plow truck for that, though, last
Snow
year?
was too deep. Plow truck couldn't get down it.
Okay.
Too deep, too heavy.
Figured that, but I remember buying a truck because you wanted it for that.
Well, actually, the truck that we acquired was for plowing parking lots and the pedestrian ways and things such as that. There is a separate loader that the Public Works Department has, but it's not big enough to handle what was down there. And for the distance that we're talking about.
Sure.
Since we couldn't wire or rent any equipment, we did plow the road, but it took like 2 days. So in the meantime, we were getting it out with the snowmobile. So, and then we still, just yesterday, we were able to get a large loader to widen the road. But it took us 2 days to even plow. or open up basically one lane, so.
Okay.
Ernie?
Couple things. One question is on Warner Street, the walkway or whatever you want to call it,
Pedestrian strip.
pedestrian strip. What's the procedure for getting that plowed? Because I've had people trying to walk there and then they're out in the street and everything else in that, and
Yeah, we're gonna have to coordinate with the road commission on that. One of the issues that we have there is, if you'll recall, when we plowed it last year, we got complaints from residents because snow ended up in their driveways. So we're looking at how we're best gonna do that, and with the new plow that we have now, the plan at this point is to coordinate with the road commission and put that snow into the roadway for the road commission then to come by and pick up. Otherwise, we can't put it in the roadway. That's a restriction that we have, so we have to coordinate with them to do that.
I see someone plowing their driveway and they got piles of snow in that
Oh, yeah.
walkway.
Yeah.
It's gonna be difficult. The other item I have is on the lights on our parking lot over here, the new parking lot. What's the status on those?
We're just waiting for the light fixtures themselves to be delivered. They're all wired, the bases are in, we're just waiting for the delivery of the two stanchions and the lights.
That's it.
Other questions for Manager Gerard? Dan?
Going back to the purchase of a snowmobile, did you ever contemplate asking the fire department to use the Argo?
We did, it was not available. Yep, it was one of the things we contacted. They didn't have the tracks were not installed on it.
Well, yeah. The tracks were put on for a call within 30 minutes.
Well, we did check with them.
Pete?
Ice rink, when do they plan on watering that here? Putting their first water down? I know today they're over there cleaning the rink off, so.
Well, forecast for this weekend is 30 degrees and rain.
Oh, that's what's coming then.
No, it's just, it's usually into December before we flood that and freeze it to where we know where we're having freezing temperatures. Again, this blast that we just got is about 2.5 weeks early of what we typically have. Usually it's the second week of deer season when we start seeing snow.
All right, what I'd like to see is, I'd like to see you work with the business association and try to come up with something. When we get a new business, it's always someone else standing and greeting them in, and we're not part of it. Can we start our own little chamber of commerce or something like that, so we greet our own businesses? I think the business community should start thinking about that, because if you look in the paper, very seldom you have township recognition as far as being there when we have a business in the township opened up.
Because
So-
I'm not on the board anymore.
Huh?
I was doing it for the association.
No, but I mean, we should have it. I've been telling Randy this for a while, and now I thought, well, I might bring it up and maybe you can work on something.
Yeah, well, I think
I
what
think it's
you're,
important that we recognize our own.
yeah, and I think what you're referring to are the things you see in the paper, which are the ribbon cuttings that are conducted by the Lake Superior Community Partnership for their member organizations. They don't just do it randomly. It's their member organizations, basically, that they do those for. But yes, that's something that certainly if the board wants to do that, we certainly can.
All right, that's it, right?
Secretary?
Ice rink lighting, what's the status on that?
We met with Board of Light and Power over there today, and they're going to be, today they were ordering the mist digs. They said it takes about 3 days to get that done, and then they'll be installing the poles and the lights.
What, are they the lights like on the Lions Field, or are they street lights, or?
They're lights similar to what we have here in our parking lot. They're LED downcast lights.
Okay, yeah, that'll probably be good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We met out there this morning, we talked about, they have like 6-foot extensions, they'll be about 3 foot back from the actual rink boards, so it'll hang over the rink about 3 feet, and it's downcast lighting, so it shines directly down on the rink to eliminate the light pollution from leaking over to any of the adjoining neighborhood homes.
That was one of the items that we wanted to ensure is that the neighboring households weren't flooded with light.
The only question I have for you, Randy, and Lynn, I'm glad you brought up the snowmobile purchase because I question it too. I don't see it as a great purchase. I think that, for the amount of money that we spent, and we've been talking about some kind of a piece of equipment that would also clean the safety strip that Treasurer Johnson brought up. That seems to be a considerable expense. I know it was an emergency, we needed to get in there quick, but I'm just wishing that we could have begged, borrowed, or stole one from somewhere for a 1 or 2 day thing. I find it a very expensive purchase. Most of the stuff, I mean, when we're looking at equipment purchases like that, we need multitaskers, not unitaskers. It only does one thing that gets us in emergencies, although if we're gonna store it at the Public Works facility, we need, you know, maybe it makes more sense to store it at the fire department, because I think from an emergency response standpoint, it may make more sense for the fire department to have the accessibility to the snow machine to be able to do search and rescues in the event of snowmobile accidents and that type of thing.
Yeah, we did due diligence trying to find whatever we could. There was simply nothing available for rent. Nobody had anything available. Couldn't get anywhere. So it was a decision that I made, and at the time, it was the right one.
Thanks. So no other questions? The next item on your agenda is the new 9E, the umbrella easement. The package that I handed you, first off, if you look at the map that's on the first page of it, you'll see in the box in yellow is the proposed easement area that we're talking about. I believe that most of you have seen the ice rink and the way it is situated now, running north and south. The proposed screening fence that will run along, there's a tree barrier that exists, and Mr. and Mrs. Umbrello had a storage shed that was on this portion of the township's property. We did have it moved over so that it won't interfere with the fence, being able to run that fence almost straight down. It's gonna have to take a little jog out from behind Kitty Park, and then we'll kind of run it through the trees, and it'll be a straight shot down. It's gonna provide a good screen from their home to the recreation area. Should be able to stop any wayward pucks, that kind of thing. Also, just from a aesthetic standpoint. Now, I know the easement, so we never had a formal easement with the prior owners, Mark Simon, kind of a handshake agreement. Where we were at, and that entire area was wooded before we cleared it out for the ice rink to go in a few years back. The easement really, if you go and look at where the stakes are, next to Mr. and Mrs. Umbrella's garage, it's about 2 feet to where the property line is. So their home is non-conforming. It doesn't even meet the side yard setbacks because of where our property ownership is. And through conversations, we've suggested that we develop the easement and grant them the easement so that they have the right to use that property. I think that during the course of our negotiations, it has been broached that they may want to even purchase that property at some point. You'll note that it's not part of this easement agreement, other than it just mentions that that could be a possibility somewhere in the future. Mr. and Mrs. Umbrello are here this evening if the board has any specific questions that they may want to ask them as well. But what we're asking the board to do this evening, and this was before the Recreation Committee right immediately prior to this meeting, and on the recommendation of the Rec Committee, passed a motion to bring it to the board and recommend that we do execute the agreement with Mr. and Mrs. Umbrello for the easement. This language was written and developed by Municipal Council Roger Zappa, who has reviewed it, written it, and approved it. It has also been reviewed by Mr. and Mrs. Umbrello, who are in agreement with it, I believe. And what we're asking the board for this evening is permission to execute the agreement and permission to sign it by both myself as supervisor and Clerk Rattari.
I'll second.
We have motion and a second. Board member comment or questions?
I just have a question. Looking at where the fence will stay where it's pictured right here?
Yeah.
Or will you move it over to the edge of the easement?
If you look at it, you'll see where it kind of has that little jog right when from you look at Kitty Park as you're moving
Yes,
from south
yeah.
to north, and it takes that little jog and then that brown dotted line. That's the proposed fencing. It'll follow right along the easement that we're granting, and it's basically, you know, just a 20-foot strip of property that runs up along there. And it gives them the right to use it and put snow on and do everything else. This easement does not grant them, it's not a permanent easement. It doesn't go with the property in perpetuity. It's only to Mr. and Mrs. Umbrello at this point. If they were to sell the home, then the easement is, reverted back, that easement reverts back to the township, and it would have to be renegotiated with any future homeowners at this point. Other questions? Anything that, Mr. Miller, you'd like to add, or? They've been great to work with through this process, I will tell you that, including from moving the shed, and, I think as we've, developed a recreational area, and while the ice rink has been there for the last several years, I think we're trying to develop a really nice community asset there, and I think just being able to, this is kind of a good neighbor policy, granting the easement, putting up a privacy fence, and really trying to look out for what's in the best interest of not only developing our recreational assets, but also to make sure that we're neighbor friendly. There's no other comment. We have a motion and a second to approve easement as presented. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Those members of public wishing to address this board may do so at this time. Going once, going twice. The kids from Marquette High School, you want to get up and talk it off? We'll close public comment. Move to additional comments from board members.
Nothing, thanks.
Wow. First time for everything. We will, I only have one comment. Speaking of the ice rink, you guys thought it was going to go away, didn't you? Speaking of the ice rink, if you haven't had the opportunity yet to get out there and check it out. It's cool. I mean, it's the nicest outdoor rink of anyone in the area. We should be very proud of it. Now it just, we have to make sure that we maintain it like we should. I have talked to a friend of mine who maintains a outdoor ice rink as well, who has volunteered to come over and work with our building and grounds department to make sure that they fully understand all the intricacies of developing and maintaining a nice ice surface. So we're real excited about it. And I think that if you get a chance to look at it, and as we develop it over the next few weeks, as much as it pains me to say, I hope it stays cold so that we can get the ice in. It would be great. Hey, winter came and knocked on our door in a hurry and came all at once. We might as well have ice. So hopefully we'll have people skating on it in just a few weeks. Ernie?
I think once we get the lights up and they're what we want, we invite the news media over there for an evening to show them what it is for, especially in the evening. In the day they can go, but in the evening when you have the lights on, then that would be great.
It's going to be a skating party, Christy, so bring your skates. If there's no other comments, we'll close board member comment. And what I will say is, before we discuss moving into closed session, because we're going to come back out of closed session and have the forum discussion, that'll be continued discussion of the 2015 budget. If any of you want to stay for some riveting budget discussion immediately following the closed session, we will certainly love to have you immediately following closed session. In fact, if any of you want to stay, you can let us know, and the board can leave and go meet in another one of our conference rooms, and we'll come back. But with that, we will...
Just a comment, Supervisor. We
Yep.
we have 2 items for closed session, and I think the correct way of doing it is 2 motions to move into closed session for both items.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion to go into closed session pursuant to MCL 15.268C for strategy negotiation sessions connected with negotiation of a collective bargaining agreement if either negotiating party request a closed hearing. That'll be the first motion.
And I'll second it.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
It's a roll call.
Oh,
vote.
yeah. Well, you already got your answer. I'm not trying to rush you.
All right. The second motion. Enter into closed session pursuant to MCL 15.268 subsection H to consider material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state or federal statute. And I make that motion.
Support.
We motion and support. Any comment? Seeing none, Clerk Rattari?
Retirees, yes. Treasurer Johnson?
Yes.
Trustee LaRue?
Yes.
Trustee Pompo?
Yes.
Trustee Durant,
Yes.
Trustee Trescott,
Yes.
and Supervisor Limata.
Yes.
Motion carries. We're in closed session at 8:03 PM.
Thank you.
Supervisor, you can tell them that the budget part will be on the rest of the video. So
Yes,
if
it
they
will
want to
be.
watch it,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we'll pause it.
And we're back in open session. We'll move into our forum discussion for continued discussion of the 2015 budget. In light of the information on public fire protection that we sought and received, there has been some changes to both the fire fund budget and to the water budget. So we have updates for those tonight. We also have an update to the solid waste because of the tipping fees that have been in the news lately. So the solid waste budget, Kirk has provided an update for us on that as well. I think probably the easiest thing to do would be to start with the fire department budget, because we did ask them to make some changes in light of the contribution to the public fire protection. And I know that Chief Sims and Manager Gerard met this afternoon and have put some recommendations together. So I will turn it over to Manager Gerard and Chief Sims to share that with the board.
Bob, do you want the podium, or you want to stay where you're at? All right. Oh. Oh, okay. Well, as Supervisor Lehman mentioned, Bob and I and Dan did get together today, and what we did is we came up with a compromise proposal to the board, basically, and it's in the same format that you've seen before. On the department request column is reflecting the Supreme Court decision in favor of the township, and on my manager's column, manager recommended column, is reflecting a Supreme Court decision against the township. That impacts revenues, basically, so that impacts differently how we approached the spread of that throughout the budget. We don't necessarily agree on all of the changes. The department request side of it shows where, given the scenario of having to come up with an additional $60,000, that's where it would come from. And in essence, the majority of it comes from the proposed excess revenue over expenditures. It was in the budget, roughly $47,000, I believe. Which was now zero, and then throughout the budget, picking up the additional difference to equate to the $60,000. On the manager's recommended column, I didn't have that fund balance or that excess revenue over expenditures, because I'm taking the we lose type approach on it. So I've gone through and identified where I would, and this is without the benefit of discussing it with Chief Sims previously until today, where I would have made adjustments in the budget where I chief. So that's what you have before you, and it's basically both of them come up with a balanced budget, both of them come up with the additional $60,000. It's just the differences in the manner of how we get there in terms of what we would approach.
So what you're really showing to the board, when we look at the department request, it's just like before, when we look at the department request, what you're really saying is this is, all things being equal, we continue to prevail on the Michigan Tax Tribunal. The Supreme Court takes it up and looks favorably upon us, and we move forward.
Correct, and you continue to provide all the services of the fire department.
Okay.
On Randy's, some of them where he zeroed out, like repair and maintenance for building and grounds. You know, that means there's no money there at all for building and grounds repair and maintenance. Under administration, 337,750 uniforms, that was zeroed out. By contract, we have to supply uniforms for our employees every year. dues and subscriptions. Those dues are, what we paid last year was, just a minute here. The Michigan State Firemen's Association, Michigan Fire Inspector, the NFPA, UP Fire Chiefs Association, Marquette County Fire Association, and UP Firefighters Association. That totaled $764.
Your concerns, Randy, is whether it's an allowable expense?
Yeah, and actually, that's what I looked at is how does that actually apply in those areas? And again, without the benefit of having discussion with Bob prior to today, do those actually fall as requirements for fire protection and prevention under the special assessment? That's the only rationale. Not that you shouldn't have it or that it's not valid or anything along those lines. It was just a first look type
Okay.
opinion. And again, you were talking about $750.
And it's membership dues, Bob, so that we belong to the organization, you mean?
Yes. You know, the UP Fire Chiefs, Michigan Fire Chiefs, NFPA is where we get most of our building codes information from,
Okay.
and inspectors.
Yeah, that seems to make sense to me. I think you can make that argument.
And then,
So we're gonna leave it at $1,000 then?
Well, I think if we're looking at where the department request is and what the manager's recommendations are, and, I think it seems like a logical or an allowable expense to me. I think he makes a point with the uniforms that we've got to provide them. If you look at like the prior years, 851, 1914, 491, and then 853 was spent through June of this year.
through September this year, I think we spent $1,700 on uniforms.
1,700. Okay.
And we just ordered some more shirts. The polo shirts we have were 10 years old. So,
You also ordered boots also, is that went in there too? Is that separate?
Separate. Wildland boots.
well,
are
the
down
boots
for
are, the only boots we ordered
The Wildlands.
is safety boots for the two of them full-time.
Okay.
That comes out of there.
I think Pete's talking about the Wildland boots that we had
Yeah.
budgeted.
That would
It's
that
further,
be
it's
in
in,
there too?
it's in capital.
That'd be under
That's
capital.
down
That's
under
under
capital.
capital, okay.
And then under travel and conference, that would be the EMS conference, the fire inspector conference. Anything else that, and it does include the tournament, the $2,200. But
The tournament, Bob, and I did talk to Dan a little bit about it, but I think that we can make the argument. I think we just need to, you saw the opinion that we received from council, and I think that we can make the argument. We just need to be able to document that it is a educational and training experience, and
And they do have vendors there, they do have demonstrations, and Thursday, there's 3 meetings that Michigan Fire Chiefs, UP Fire Chiefs, and then Upper Peninsula Firefighter Association. There's a meeting at 9 o'clock, noon, and 2 o'clock. That is, we attend. Normally, half a dozen go to the UP one, so
okay.
it's not like, and I'd say a half a dozen of the guys go up on Wednesday, and they pay their own way Wednesday and Thursday, And what the money we use from the township is used for, Thursday night and Friday night mostly for rooms, They don't get reimbursed for meals at the township rate. You know, they just get a flat rate. And they don't get paid in mileage at the township rate. They just get $25, you know.
Okay.
So it's not, you know, if we went for the township rate, you're probably looking, you know, $4,500. You know, and most of the guys, if they get just enough to pay for the room, they're happy, you know.
I think we can, I think we can have that conversation just with council, and I think we get that approved, right? I mean, I think it's an allowable expense, but let's clarify it before we move forward. But I think from a budgetary standpoint, we can say yes, I think it's an allowable expense. Randy, you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that board members understand that it's not Bob and I arguing back and forth about these. I'm simply taking the position that we lose in front of the Supreme
gotta
Court.
make
So
cuts somewhere, right?
we got a severely restricted revenue stream, and we have to make some hard decisions. That,
I understand.
just, we're giving you the outside parameters.
And education and training, we have a ITLS class coming up in February. That's going to be $2,000. And you're also looking at any additional training, like for the 2 full-time employees going downstate. And like we bring in people for certification for AED and our CPR cards. And every once in a while, we try to get somebody to come in for extrication, propane, other different, you know, types of training. They charge for it. So, you know, it's something we have to, like an extrication class is $600. The UP EMS conference, they send those guys down there to get
Excuse me.
credits for renewing their license. And I don't know how many people went, but it was $760 and another $200, so it's not just, it's training that is done throughout the department.
You know how I'm real big on training, obviously. I mean, you're aware of that. I think the more training and education that you guys have available to you and that you can go get, the better we are as a township, as a department. I think that what Randy's trying to say is, where's the expendable cuts out? Well, what do we do in extreme emergency if you suddenly lost $46,000 out of your budget? You know, what would you do? And you know, I don't know what the board's philosophy is going to be as we move forward and adopt the budget, whether it's roll with the department request or with their manager's recommendation or some variation of the two.
In between.
You know, kind of in between, so that knowing that if we don't prevail with our Michigan Tax Tribunal challenges, we may have to come back and revisit your budget in the middle of the year and say, man, we're looking for another $46,000. You know, we'd have to make some tough choices at that time.
Yeah. And it's gonna, you know, it's gonna be, I guess, you know, the choices are gonna be made, but my feeling is still, you know, if we do make the cuts, and if we win with the state, are we gonna get the full $46,000 that we would have,
They'll split the baby.
or are we gonna get anything? And the other line is gonna be is, right now, we talked about if they lose, we're gonna have to pay back 72 grand.
Yep.
Where's that gonna come from?
Right.
Prior years, yeah.
You know,
Oh, I understand.
so that's,
Dan?
Well, I think depending, and I don't know how we can possibly decide which budget we would go with, because we're not really know. And that to me is that's a tough decision. So even if we went with the worst case scenario, there's nothing to say that if we did lose and we had to come up with $46,000 plus Bob's other $72,000, as far as I can see, we don't have to. I mean, if we need money in travel and conference, we don't have to stay with this. I mean, we might turn around and
We can
say,
do
well, you know what?
transfers.
We've got 2 full-time employees. One might have to go part-time to make up that cash.
Right, we have to make
Or
decisions.
whatever. We might have to, we're gonna take money out of whatever to make this up, because, it's not an easy choice. And it also not just, it just doesn't revolve around the fire fund. This revolves around every budget that we have. And it would be nice if we could find out at some point in time whether we're gonna win or lose, or, but I don't foresee in the near future seeing anything of that. I think next year's is gonna just roll along as it is, and nothing's gonna change. In which case, we do have to, roll with whatever. So we're in a very unstable area to actually adopt a budget if we don't really know where we're standing with the money. And so, I guess the way I always looked at it is that you just take the worst case scenario and go with that. If we do win, well, good, we got extra money. But if we don't win, at least we're budgeted for it. So I don't know how we're gonna do this, as well as the water funds also.
Well, I think it's a good point, Dan, and I think it's about the board's level of risk, how we feel. It's our philosophy as a board. How do you guys feel? I mean, are you comfortable and confident with, like Dan's scenario, you just go with the worst case scenario, you say we brace for the worst, adopt, basically the manager's recommendation on this, brace for the worst, and we prevail in the Supreme Court, they agree to take our case, and it gets remanded back, and like I said, I think it'll be a split the baby decision anyway. We won't win 100%. It's not gonna go back, and we'll prevail 100%. If it gets remanded back to the tax tribunal, they'll split it somewhere along the line. Or do you want to move forward and say it's business as usual until we get told otherwise? And I guess, what's the board feel like here? Let's take the pulse right now, Lynn.
No, I think we need to be conservative. And I'm wondering if even looking at these tonight is premature, because until we know for sure what's acceptable and not, as far as being required or allowable, whichever word you want to use, I think the two of you need to get back together and do an allowable one, and then tell us the worst case scenario of everything that you can fund. But I wouldn't want to go on as business as usual, because we know that we're probably going to have to absorb at least 50% of it. We need to go with worst case, in my mind.
Diana?
I'm more on the conservative about the worst case scenario myself. Be a little bit better.
Ernie?
Worst case sounds fine, but I'm looking at, we got 250,000 invested there. And when you look at the taxes coming in, there's about $47,000 differential there. We don't really know what that's gonna end up being at all. So you can take part of that investment and just set it aside to kind of make up for it if something happens in that. And we're gonna have to pay back X number of dollars. And so you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, which way you want to go. You can go conservative, but is it going to be conservative enough or not? So I think some of that investment money is going to have to be set aside for the unknown, because we really don't know what's going to happen in that. Because I have a feeling that we're talking 47,000. We don't know if it's going to be more than that. With the rest of them are filing suit, because if it stands as to what the appeals court says, beware, we're gonna have a lot more coming in real quick in that too, so,
Floodgates are open.
yes, so, we don't know. And where we're gonna get the money to go back, because you can go back,
3 years?
3 years.
3 years, so you're kind of sitting there treading water, because you don't know what's gonna happen. So, you can go conservative, but you still have to do some of these things. You don't have a choice on it, and that, so. I think what Lynn says, trying to come up with a hybrid at this point in time, and then set some of those dollars aside for that unknown that's sitting out there completely in that. So that's kind of where, I don't know if I answered your question or
Yep,
not.
no, I think so. Somebody care to make a motion to extend the meeting 30 minutes?
Yes, I will make a motion.
I'll second.
A motion and a second to extend the meeting from 9:30 to 10 o'clock. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
I didn't have to make it.
Even I pushed for it this time, Ernie. I think you guys have all brought up really good points, and I think Bob, when you looked at, like uniform expenditure, dues and subscriptions, I think that Randy would agree that those need to go back in there. I think that you're probably right, even from a conservative standpoint. Some of those things, Bob just needs to make the argument with Randy, and we need to put some of that back in, but it'll still take a very conservative approach, and,
Well, actually, my approach is more the conservative, it's extreme.
right?
We wanted to give you the extreme outsides, so someplace in the middle is, like I said, we're not necessarily disagreeing with each other. It's just a matter of the approach that we're presenting to the board, so you have a rationale or at least an idea of what you might be dealing with outside parameters.
I think what you're hearing from a board where we're more comfortable at is somewhere in the middle, but on the conservative side. Dan?
I think because the fire department took the high road and the manager took the low road, I think that if we are going to meet in the middle, I think the fire department needs to go back and look at their budget and see exactly because again, obviously there's disagreements between where the money is being taken out. So I think the fire department needs to go back and decide exactly whatever road we pick them to go back to, what they, their best case scenario of what they can do.
Well, to start with allowable, that's what I meant.
Right.
Start with
What
that.
they have to have.
Right, yeah.
And then go from there. And I think that's, and then once the fire department comes up with theirs, then maybe they can meet with Manager Gerard and then bring it back to the board. It's unfortunate that we're running out of time.
And we started early.
Just because of this in itself, I think we're gonna, we have not scheduled any further budget meetings, and I think the
December 2nd.
3rd of December is coming up pretty quick.
2nd of December, we got another one.
Ernie?
The question I have, following up on Dan's there, the general fund has the timeframes they have to meet. Now, does the fire department have to meet that, and
Yeah.
does the enterprise fund have to meet it?
Township budget, yeah, the township budget has to meet it, so it's all the elements of the budget has to meet the same time frame.
Now, is that state statute, or is that township board?
And that's
Policy.
Charter Township Act.
So all budgets have to.
All of the township departments have to be on the same time frame.
So basically, I think the number one decision we have to make is, are we gonna request $80,000 to Kurt, which makes his pretty easy because he doesn't really have to go back and do anything with his, whereas the fire department has to go back now and figure out exactly their worst case scenario of where they're gonna get everything and still be a viable department that is still manageable. So it's obvious that I think that's probably the first thing should be decided is it 80,000? I know the 103,000 was thrown around. I think we have to decide exactly, first of all, how much contribution the fire department's gonna give to the water fund.
Sure, I think you guys have seen my rationale for where I came up with the dollar amount. I did vet it with legal counsel, who agreed that it's the last solid dollar amount that we have was 2001. Unless somebody has a better theory about how to come up to today's dollars, that's why I went with the inflation factors. Dan?
Okay, I know you went with the 103. Initially, the fire department was told 80. I think it was pretty much a scrimp and save thing to get to the 80. And if we require them to go to 103, that's another 23.
Oh, no, that, 80 was all that they had, because it's 103 less the cost of private fire protection, and then that's the bulk that,
So we're asking the fire department
Came
to
down to
come
60 more.
the 80, yeah.
Total 80.
Sure.
You know, and I don't like it, but what about if we settle for 40? It give us wiggle room, you know, to increase it by 60,000 in 1 year. That's like going out and saying your car insurance is gonna go up, you know, threefold, and go from there. First got a raise, you know, we're losing money, but we're not losing.
I
And-
understand where you're coming from, but I could not make that recommendation, based on the advice of legal counsel.
But
Randy?
I would suggest that, Bob, Dan, and Dan, get together. I mean, there are certain things, Bob said tonight, there's certain things they have to do to maintain certifications and things such as that. Those have to be done. So whatever changes need to go between these two to make that occur needs to happen. Things like the polo shirts and that aren't, I mean, they're not critical to the operation of the department this year. I mean, I think that's the kind of decisions that need to go here. I think we are going to end up somewhere in the middle, somewhere in between. Supreme Court has basically three options. Don't touch it is one option, just reject it totally, not even take it up. Second option is to take it up, have a hearing, and remand it back to the appeals court level. And their third option is interpret the law and apply it. And realistically, as snowballing as this is throughout the state, if they take it up, I think they're going to have to address the law and define what the law says and tell the Court of Appeals and the tax tribunal this is what the law is, and correct your decisions. So I mean
When?
those are the three options we're dealing with, and I can't see them not taking the case because everybody, including the state of Michigan, is now involved in it. Cities, townships, villages, the state of Michigan, everybody's involved in it now, and it's snowballing. They don't want it to get to residential. I mean, that kills the state if it gets to residential. So, I think they will take it up, it's a roll of the dice as to which of the two ways they go, whether they remand it, whether they, just avoid it and remand it back to the Court of Appeals, which really does nothing for us because all the Court of Appeals does is reviews the transcripts from the tribunal. The Supreme Court has the ability.
I think you're right in the fact that they will take it up, and I think they will because of the fact that, like with the IBM case, they chose not to take it up, but they even said then they didn't do it because the legislature jumped in to make corrections right now that would not allow it to snowball, so that each individual entity will have to file on their own merits. With our case, that isn't true. This thing is wide open, and so I think it does bode well for us because of the way they ruled in the IBM case. I think it probably holds well for us, in that they're going to be required because the legislative efforts have failed so far, and in light of that, they know that something has to be done. So I think it's got enough, statewide ramifications that we get picked up.
It does. I understand, the fire department's concerns and where they're at, and there are certain things that they must do to continue to be a fire department, and we have to fund those. And I think those should be the first things that get funded, and then we start whittling it down from there, in terms of those. Now, today, when we got together, the chief has gone back and looked at the utilities and those kinds of things and done some sharper calculations, and we've got a little bit of a dispute on not a dispute, but a difference of opinion on the firefighting side of it with regard to the trend, basically, in terms of what's been spent on firefighting and what's requested. But they're not huge. They're not big. And I think Dan's right. The biggest question is, what is the contribution to the public fire protection going to be? And that answers a lot of the questions.
So if, Dan's point, I mean, where's the board on that? Is it, you have seen what my recommendation is and why I'm making the recommendation that I'm at. Does somebody want to put something else out there?
Other than 80,000?
Right. That's what Bob's requesting, but, I mean, clearly, I won't support anything other than that dollar amount. unless I can have some type of verification on how you would develop that additional, or that amount.
I think the biggest thing, what is public fire protection? I think the public's gonna ask about that when you start seeing that dollars going over there and that. What is it they're paying for, what it amounts to and that. So that's something you're gonna have to put in detail in the language that the township residents can understand in that. Because they're figuring that that money is going to the fire department for fire protection, fire trucks, firemen, and everything else in that. That's what they're looking for in that. They don't understand the direction that you're going. So that's something that's gonna have to be defined for them in that. Because it's gonna be a major problem then if you go out on millage of that. Because they're gonna say, we're already paying it in our water and sewer rates. Well, that's something you're gonna have to address, one way or another.
Lynn?
No, I disagree. I think right now the issue is how much money are we going to have in this budget? How much do we have to have? If that 80 is left, it could be 20, it could be 100. You got to define, first of all, what we have to have. That's going to come with the cost of service study and where we decide to go with however, what the amount is, who gets what. Those things will answer that. For right now, we need to decide how much is available and how much is needed. That 80,000 may change. It could be 90, it could be 30. Until we know what he has to have for the department, we can't determine if that 80 is good or not right now. There's too many unknowns. And I think the four of them can work that out, whether the fire department does it and then bring it to Randy and they tweak it, or the four of them sit down and do it together.
Dan?
Well, I agree with Lynn. I mean, it's really gonna be hard to say what that dollar amount is until we sit down and see exactly what we have to have and how much we can take away. I mean, we can't, the fire department can't get to the point where we have gone into the negatives of anything that we have. We have to maintain a fire department. I think the public expects us to maintain a fire department. And if when we get our pencil sharpened and we get as low as possibly can go, and we only have $65,000, you know, I mean, you could demand to go 80, but then you're gonna dip into, again, then that's just arbitrary, but I mean, if you're gonna demand that we have to, if the fire department has to give more than what we can do and not maintain the fire department, then that doesn't work. So it's basically gonna have to be a sit-down with the budget group in the fire department and go over this whole thing again and go down to our bare bone minimum of what we can actually get by with, and hope like heck nothing follows, anything drastic happens that would force us to go above and beyond. And that could be anything. We could have a fire truck that goes, God knows what happens to it. And then we're, you know, it's a fine line when we have to be that precise as to your budget. And I know, you know, budget's supposed to work that way, but unforeseen circumstances happen. And you know, so again, that's just what I'm saying. You know, if the 80,000, if it works out fine, when we get everything done and say, yep, we can afford the 80,000, then fine. But if it comes down to the fact we can only afford 65, 70,000, then they have to come back. I guess it's, you know, and give justification. That's all I can say.
For me, the number is the number. It's, you know, unless somebody can come up with another method that challenges my methodology, then I'm going with the total cost of public fire protection is $103,000, and it gets charged into the 2.5 special mill assessment. Unless you have a different methodology that shows that number is less, then the number is the number. That's not the number we change. I don't think we're in danger of not having a fire department by any means. With a over $500,000 budget, we can certainly maintain a fire department with $500,000. I don't have any fear of that. You got a budget in front of you that I think is pretty much saying that they can maintain fire protection and prevention and not really cut anything with the budget in front of you. you know, Randy's budget, again, worst-case scenario, doesn't sound like the board thinks we need to be all the way there. I think that if they split the difference here, I think we have a budget that the board could accept. Pete?
I just think we should put the actual numbers in here. We went through tonight about, you know, prescriptions and dues and stuff like that. I think that should be allowable according to what we discussed earlier. And I think, did you ask a question, or was the question asked if they could take it in 2 steps or anything like that? Like he said he wanted 40, and was that question asked, or it's not allowable?
It's not possible.
Okay. Then we have to go back and just put the actual numbers in there they really need, and come back to us again. Find out what number it is.
Clerk Terry?
Well, December 2nd, I have scheduled a public hearing on the proposed budget, not the real budget, but the little red book just says I need to have a proposed budget for public hearing. And I'm going to need some, we're going to need some, well, I have the proposed budget ready to go into the newspaper and will be published. And this still can be adjusted after that, correct, Manager?
The notice of public hearing is actually scheduled to run Monday.
Yeah.
Monday. One time, and that satisfies the requirements. Basically, the requirements are that the notice of public hearing must run at least 7 days prior to the public hearing. It takes about 3 to 4 days for it to get into the paper, so we backed it off to 11 days. And placed it to run on Monday. That means that if you're in a position to have a public hearing and adoption at the meeting on the 2nd, you're good to go. If it's beyond that, you're still good to go. You've met the requirement for the posting of the meeting, the public hearing. So those are done. You do have to have a budget adopted in some format, a balanced budget by the end of the year, by December 31st. Does not mean that you can't amend it afterwards.
That's all my comments are.
But I think Supervisor Lehman's comments were accurate. I mean, we're not that far apart. I mean, basically, the pieces that, with the $47,000 that, or $47,000 that is in the current budget, with a couple of other changes, you're gonna be close to that 60 anyway. So I don't think we're that far apart. The gamble there is what happens with Court of Appeal, or the Supreme Court. That's the gamble.
We're really talking, you had 47,000 that was going into fund balance. We're really talking about $13,000 coming out of your proposed budget. 13,000. I think that there's $13,000 in there. I don't think that's crushing the department in any way, shape, or form.
I think it's actually less than that, because I think we've got somewhere around $10,000, another line item that we need to talk about, go from there as well.
Kirk, you got about 12 minutes.
We've jumped now from middle of the road to the best case scenario.
Well, no,
Where, well,
No.
yeah, because you're saying $13,000. That was what fire department figured for their best case
Yeah,
scenario.
that's what I say, the wild card there is what happens with the Supreme Court.
Right. If you, it's, the $47,000 was going into the fund balance.
Well, but what are you asking the fire department? There was 2 scenarios. There was best case scenario and there was worst case scenario. And then I was gathering that we were talking about middle of the road of that.
Right,
But
and
then
all
you
I
came
said,
back and said is
and all I said from a
$13,000.
fire department standpoint, the only difference to where they were at is $13,000.
Right.
So that's the only cuts that Bob really needed to look at from his department request was $13,000
You talking about the original?
And that's what we
from
did.
his original department.
Presuming-
Right.
presuming.
So, I mean, that's not too drastic here. Randy's request, now what we're requesting of Randy is from his worst-case scenario, it's gotta, I mean, you've gotta come, you know, using your numbers with, what's that look like to you, right? I
Right.
mean,
What
some
we-
of the things that we're talking about, the board just told you that we like to be, we wanna take a conservative approach, but it's not, as drastic as you have painted.
Right, and I understand that.
I'm confused as to what you're asking the fire department
What direction?
to go with on the budget.
If you
But my-
accepted our budget the way it was presented tonight, then you got your 80,000. And we're just gonna have to wait and see what the court does.
To roll the dice at that point. So what I,
And then we're done. You know, I'm not happy with it. And I won't be ever happy with it, but, you know, it's, a balanced budget. You got what you asked for until the court comes back and says something different,
So,
you know.
Right.
so that's not the conservative approach.
No, that's what I'm saying is from their request, what you're saying, you're painting this scenario like we won't be able to have a fire department and he should only maybe go with 40,000. I'm saying, no, we only asked you to take, from your standpoint, it was $13,000. But we're telling Manager Gerard, I mean, he also presented you a balanced budget with the $80,000 contribution. And still, it's a balanced budget on a
Understood.
very conservative approach, but we're saying there's certain things, and none of the things we talked about are big dollar amounts. Uniforms, $3,000, dues and subscriptions, $1,000. It's a couple thousand here. Even Randy's budget with the worst-case scenario isn't, we're not asking him to,
close up the fire department.
right?
We asked the fire department to go back and redo their budget. What do you want them to redo it at, is my question.
What I heard was the consensus. What I heard as a consensus was for the fire department and me to get together, come down with what they absolutely have to run a fire department, see what that cost is and where it puts us, and then what adjustments we could make back and forth between us to bring one budget recommendation back to the board, not a high or a low.
Right, but on a conservative approach.
On a conservative approach, recognizing.
Not as conservative as Manager Gerard.
Not
has
as
delivered.
extreme, let me put it that way. Not at the extremes that we're at. Like a lot of the things that Bob mentioned today, the things that you have to, that they have to do with the meetings and those kinds of things, we'll put those back into the budget, and see where we're at,
So
adjust.
my understanding is that the fire department goes back and takes each line item and decides exactly what the minimum amount of money can be allocated to that line item. Is that what you're asking?
I think that what we're asking as a board is for the fire department to sit down with Manager Gerard and go through line item by line item, and then give us back the budget that is a dual recommendation from both of them that they agree on. A more conservative approach than the fire department has taken, but not as conservative as Randy has provided with us.
And until, I guess if we get our full budget, okay, and nothing happens with the state this year or next year or whatever, and, then what we do? We're gonna have a
Well,
balance, budget won't be balanced, we're gonna have fund balance. And like I said before, we're looking at a building that's gotta be paid off in 6 years now. And where's that gonna come from?
Well, number one, the building doesn't have to be paid off in 6 years. We can take as long as we need to pay off the building. If we refinance at prevailing rates. Number two, you have 2.5 mils, up to 2.5 mils to collect for your budget each and every year moving forward. We continue to have that at rate of growth, so your budget continues to grow each and every year. When we get the actual cost of service study done next year, and we know exactly what they attribute to public fire protection, we can probably rely on that number for 5 years at a time before it would make an adjustment, and we'd have to do a updated cost of service study every 5 years. It will tell you exactly where you're gonna be at with that number without any guesswork involved. If you need to, right now, it's with anything additional in your budget at the end of the year can be put towards the principal on your building loan and pay it off quicker. Once it's paid off, then we have to determine how much we can collect of that 2.5 mils, what is absolutely needed and necessary for operations, We make that decision, we collect that millage. Now, if you need equipment, we just have to bond for it and go get it. If you need a truck, we have to bond for it and go get a truck and pay it back from the budget moving forward.
No. I ain't gonna say that right now. I don't know if I can say anything about it or not. So, if it's, you're talking about the 2.5 mils, are you talking about the letters that we've been receiving, or can we talk about that now, or we have to wait?
The 2.5 mils, Bob, the special assessment, I mean, you've gotten some information on what this special assessment entails.
Right.
And what we can and can't pay for, and how much we can collect. We can collect the full 2.5 mils every year as long as we can show that it's being used for fire protection and prevention and emergency services, which we've been able to do every single year. We put the money towards. The only thing that's impacted you is in the fund balance. You can't hold the future fund balance from the special assessment.
But if we switch that special assessment to 2.5 mils millage, then we can have a fund balance, and we can have,
You can, but that's something that the board will have to take up sometime next year to discuss, because right now, we've got a special assessment out there till 2022. So we have to look at the legal ramifications about if the board would decide that they want to fund emergency services through a regularly collected tax millage versus a special assessment. We can certainly look into that and find out what the possibilities are out there, and whether that makes sense for us to do versus staying with a special assessment that's been levied through 2020-22. Will it make sense for us? I don't know, but we'll have to get some legal advice on moving forward when we already have the special assessment on the books through 2022. And then what that looks like as far as when do we present that as a millage question to the voters. If you wanted, if the board decided that they wanted to switch how we fund fire department operations, there's a lot of questions that I have to get answers for before we can move in that direction, and it definitely will not be until after the first of the year.
well, I know that, but if we're, and my feeling is, we should look into it, and if we can do it next year at one of the elections, replace the 2.5 mils special assessment to a 2.5 mils tax. And that way we can carry.
I'd like to save money.
And
Yeah, it's
because,
both good. They both have features that are good and bad, but it'll have to be saved for a future discussion.
yeah, and I didn't know how much you wanted to talk about it or not.
We'll talk about it. We'll put it on a specific agenda to discuss after the first of the year.
All right.
Would you like another motion for 15 minutes?
No, I want Kirk to go home. I'm sorry that we didn't get to your budget, Kirk. Some of the highlights, though, before we close out, is
I got
just to
3
look
minutes.
at.
He's got 3 minutes.
I can do it in 3 minutes.
All right, perfect.
You're the man.
Okay, the water budget is pretty straightforward. It's not, it's a net zero change, okay? All I did was add $60,000 in revenues for public fire protection. I took $60,000 out of the charges for service, or not service, the sales, which is the rates, okay? And the net effect is zero. But it does impact, so that the $60,000 that the fire department will be contributing will come out of what we're getting from our customers.
Sales, because your recommendation for the rate went from, well, it was at 697, you were proposing 711.
Right.
And now it's 643 is your new proposed
Correct.
per thousand.
Yeah.
Dan?
One other question, though. You changed your base rate from $6 to $7.
Right, and I'm keeping that at $7.
And then the other change that we needed to be concerned with was on the solid waste budget. And like I
Right.
said, it's clearly been in
I
the
got some
news.
questions here.
Okay.
You're talking about this budget here, which I had a lot of questions. It's too bad you weren't here at the meeting, but question I have, even at the lower rate here, I'm looking for justification, like I talked to Kurt already
Yep.
on Monday on some of this and that, looking for how some of this is gonna happen and that. Are you still talking about the two new positions at the same time, at this point in time?
No, I'm talking about one position.
Well, I'm not even talking about one position until someone comes up with some justification for it. You did give me or provided the board with a list of all the activities. But the other side of the coin is, why aren't those activities getting done? That information is not available to us, as I mentioned to you on Monday, and that's the information I'm looking for in that.
Right.
So, and I also mentioned to you, back in the 90s, when I was on the board, we purchased software to do all this. It was never utilized in that. So that information is not available. So how do we justify additional personnel without having some background information? I'm talking from a business standpoint at this point.
I understand that. And I agree with you, and we are using that software now, but we're only in the beginning stages. So the documentation exists that you're looking for. And basically, as I understand it, he wants documentation for everything that's happening right now. And I also, along with that, I would conversely need to provide you with documentation of what's not getting done. That's what I'm asking for. Okay, I'm saying certain maintenance activities are not getting done. It's going to be a major task to provide those numbers for you, okay?
You're saying it's
So-
not getting done. Why isn't it getting done? You don't have the documentation in front of you to prove that point.
I've got the documentation, that's stacks of records, okay? It's going to be much easier in the future because we are moving to what you're suggesting, which is what you did at Northern. And that's great, that's what we want to do. I do not have the resources that you had at Northern. You had one whole department, that's all you did, okay? And we're going to be doing it with existing resources and existing staff, but we're not there yet.
But what do we do in the meantime?
Well, in the meantime, you just either take my recommendation or you don't take my recommendation.
Right. I don't know what else he can give you. What you're asking for, he doesn't have available. For 3 months, you said, I need to see some data, and I don't know what it is. If I knew what it was, I'd go get it for you. But I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what you're asking for. Kirk says he knows what you're asking for, but he can't readily provide it.
It's similar to what, we had the discussion about doing a work study. Okay, it's similar to that, only it's documenting what people are doing, okay? How much time does it take? What are they doing? What's the task? Okay, and everyone agreed that that was a waste of time and a waste of money. Does anybody remember that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. If I may, go over my time limit, because I don't want to come back here again either. So I'd appreciate another 2 minutes.
All right.
On the solid waste,
Yep.
okay, the board did agree to an increase effective January 1st. The increase is in fact based on the letter that they mailed to all their constituents that we received on October 28th. It's going to, in our case, it's going to result, what I did is I used last year's tonnage, okay, which was 1,202 tons, times the new rate, or times the increase, which is $4.73 a ton, okay? Divided by our current number of customers, which is 1,414, divided by 12, comes out 35 cents more per month, which equates to $15.10 a month. And it's similar, and all I did was, I know what the increased expenses are going to be, so I add in the revenue column that same amount.
What's the total increase dollar amount for if you come up to 1510, how much total for the year?
For the year, $5,685.
Now, when we were talking about before, you made a comment at the last meeting because it was on the agenda, and it really should be on, should be on the consent one, just for information. And you made a comment that you could probably take that right out of your budget and not have to raise increases and that. No, I went back.
Well, because they had, what I was trying to say was, they had been talking about this for a long time. So it wasn't until October 28th that we knew that they were going to do it. But still, it hadn't been done. It didn't happen until last Thursday, I think.
Because I looked at that, and I went back through and started looking at the balance sheets, back from December of 13, October of 13, and July of 14, and that, and looking at the cash investments, accounts receivable, and that. And as of July 31st, I just used that one, it was $150,000 there, and $150,537. That's just in the cash investments and accounts receivable in that. That's in a solid waste. Now you go down to the loan receivable, you're talking about $183,000 sitting there. So the question I have is that if it's only $5,600, I would much rather take it out of our cash investments, and because that's going to gain that much when you start looking at back in December 13th, December of 13 was 138,000. We're 150,000 now. That's as of July. I don't have the latest one, but 35 cents isn't going to kill anyone. But I'm just looking at the dollars we're gaining there, plus the loan receivable from the general fund of 183,000, and yet we're going to charge people more money, and that we got a lot of money sitting out here.
Right. I think this is a conservative approach because, as Randy pointed out, there are lots of unknowns. Okay, another thing that was mentioned at the meeting, they were going to borrow $2 million. Then they said, okay, we're going to look at other alternatives to borrowing $2 million. There's still the outstanding issue of the proposed recycling center in the city of Marquette. Okay, the landfill has spent $400,000 so far on that project. Now they're arguing who's going to be responsible for paying. The city's saying it's a landfill issue, and the landfill's saying the money they spent was on city property, which they had to remediate, basically. So that hasn't been settled. So there are too many unknowns, and I'm not saying jump ahead to those unknowns. All I'm saying is deal with what we know is going to be happening January 1st.
And quite frankly, the other thing is that fund balance you're talking about is for closure, and
No,
given
that's not closure. That's not the closure.
on solid waste?
No. That's cash and investments, delinquent utilities and accounts receivable. That's not closure.
But the fund balance in the solid waste is being built up for future closure costs, and with what's going on with the Solid Waste Authority, I'm not absolutely sure that we have 50 years life
No, we
left in
don't.
that.
I know we don't. We have an investment in the landfill of 190,000. So
No, I
whatever
mean,
that is.
I mean the
for.
landfill itself. They're saying it's a 50-year life cycle, and I'm not so sure it is anymore.
But that's not closure. That dollar is cash investment that's coming up in that. So you're sitting there at 150,000 as of July and that, so.
Well, again,
I hear what you're saying.
Yep.
And that, and the unknowns are there. I'm just concerned I'm looking at all these dollars sitting here and that. I don't know how much the general fund is gonna contribute this year to it and that. Because when I looked last year, there really wasn't a lot contributed at all. So, I think that's something we as a board have to look at and build it in and say it's gonna be done and that.
Yeah, what I've got in the budget this year is a third of the remaining balance of excess revenues over expenditures.
Okay. Motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
When we're gonna meet again?
December 2nd.
So we're gonna have to discuss whatever else that's left over too.
Yeah, we'll have to meet early, apparently. Yeah, I can call a special meeting, too. Meeting adjourned.